So, the New York Times is absolutely, when I picked it up, I knew it was going to irritate me, and it did. So they're very upset. A woman by the name of Pamela Paul is very upset that this guy is a professor of African Studies, left as the president of Rogers University. So let's examine the circumstances. So after October 7th, when there was the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, when these Hamas terrorists and their friends from the UNRWA invaded Israel and massacred men, women, and children, beheading, burning, doing horrible things, and kidnapping, and still holding hostages. It was sort of a green light for all sorts of movements, sort of Palestinian liberation movements. If your liberation means massacring men, women, and children, well, not much of a liberation movement for me. So he made a deal with these people that he would what was the deal? He made a concession. So he basically said that they could, instead of telling them, this is not the great idea, it's completely distorted after what happened in October 7th, to bring up these despicable barbarian terrorists as if they're a liberation movement. What did he say instead of standing up for what's right? Then they actually have the nerve to blackmail the university to divestment from Israel and severing ties with Tel Aviv University. So they agreed not to do that, but he pledged to investigate proposals such as the establishment of a cultural center for Palestinian and other Arab American students. Wow. I mean, it's just the timing, you know what I mean? It sort of gives me heartburn, to be honest. This is a great time to reward terrorists and expose them for what they are. They're terrorists, and their liberation movement is a terror movement. But, yeah, he stepped down. This heroic figure had to step down. No, he's not a hero. The fact that these people even dared to propose anything after October 7th, such as disconnecting from Israel and punishing the victim, is absolutely wrong. Should be, if you had a moral code, which you don't. Pamela Paul. And then you have Kamala Harris is a woman of faith. She shouldn't be afraid to show it. Jessica Gross. So let's listen to her argument why Kamala Harris is a woman of faith, a woman whose main topic of conversation and debates is abortion, because it's a woman's body. But you know what? It's not really, because once there's a fertilized egg and there's a fetus, it's no longer her body, but it's a living being whose life you decide to terminate so easily, because you're not a woman of faith, because thou shalt not kill is one of the 10 commandments, also not to lie, etc., etc. So let's listen to the argument why Kamala Harris is a woman of faith. The vice president was raised in an interfaith household. She grew up going to both a Black Baptist church and a Hindu temple. She married into an observant Jewish man. It sounds like a joke. Though her faith is not something she discusses frequently, she has a lifelong, seemingly profound connection to religion. Well, I don't know which religion thinks that killing a baby, an unborn baby, is okay. But if it is, it's like Reform Judaism. I just saw a TV series, Netflix series on a rabbi dating a non-Jewish woman, and he doesn't keep Sabbath. He doesn't do anything religious, but he's a rabbi. So these are poster religious figures. And you don't have to be religious to have a moral code, but to have supposedly a faith without a moral code is sort of like it's sort of like a vegan person eating meat. It doesn't make sense. You can have your moral code But if you don't have an ideology that follows the moral code, then something is wrong. Deeply disturbing. Let's get back to the religious stuff. The woman doesn't seem to have any moral code. She doesn't mind bringing around 10 million illegal immigrants and disrupting the lives of many people that pay taxes, robbing them of their rights. She doesn't seem to take care of Americans who pay taxes and have lived there. But why does she do it? There's a political agenda there. Why she lets in all these illegal people, which will one day have voting rights? Because the Democratic Party has lost so many people because people see how hypocrisy from far away, how these people say one thing and do another. Same thing with religious hypocrites. You can't speak out on abortion constantly and present yourself as a person of faith. And it seems like maybe she did a lot of synagogue hopping or whatever it's called. She went to all these different places of worship, but she doesn't seem to have any sort of moral code of ethics. She doesn't even have a policy. She's just like going on and not really making any sense. And if there's one thing about faith, it has to make sense. There has to be like a moral code. There has to be a right and a wrong. And she doesn't seem to. If you go to all these different religious places, maybe she somehow got lost on the way to church. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. She's like the last person I would describe as a woman of faith. She doesn't seem to care about Americans. She doesn't seem to care. She makes fun of them. When they ask her questions about how they're going to manage to survive, she goes on about her fake "thou shalt not lie," another commandment she lies, her fake childhood, as if she was struggling, when there's a video of her neighborhood in Montreal, not America, where she grew up in a millionaire's villa neighborhood. So she lies, she supports murder, she doesn't seem to respect people's intelligence enough to present a policy that makes sense. And so I don't think she has character, because she doesn't seem to have a right and a wrong. He doesn't seem to have a right and a wrong either. And let's go to our friend. Why everything is spiraling out of control for Israel. So Thomas Friedman seems to think that the biggest problem Israel has is not supporting a Palestinian state, because October 7th surely was a sign that the only solution to barbaric, massacring, kidnapping terrorists is to give them a state, because it's not enough they got Gaza and they had full control of Gaza. We should give them full control over East Jerusalem and the West Bank, because they did such a great job in Gaza, digging terror tunnels, endangering their own population, not having one bomb shelter. And let's talk about animals, not having even one animal shelter. But they're ready for a state. Well, when the Jews returned to Israel, I mean, they've always stayed in Israel. Some of them always stayed in Israel even after they were conquered and massacred, when the temples were destroyed, both temples, the first and the second. When the Jews came back to Israel in the modern Zionistic movement, they actually prepared for a state by creating an infrastructure for that, by making sure there's an education system where you teach children values other than to kill other people. In fact, I've never heard of any Israeli child learning that it's okay to kill other people, contrary to the Palestinians that teach their children to murder Jews, not only Israelis, Jews. Mein Kampf, they teach Hitler ideology. They don't care about the children enough to actually make sure their schools are safe. They send rockets from schools and hospitals. So this is the infrastructure they're preparing for a Palestinian state. But, you know, Thomas Friedman doesn't miss an opportunity to blame Israel for everything. It's always Israel's fault, and primarily the Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's always his fault. It's his fault that Lebanon is sending rockets. It's his fault that last night Yemen sent rockets. And the fact that Thomas Friedman doesn't seem to give fault to the terrorist movements, the Islamic terror, they're not at fault. But it's Israel's fault for not giving a state to Islamic terrorists.